Hi, I'm Jim Bearden, and this is Leadership at the Points of Contact. It's a series of 5 to 6 minute videos that I have developed to help people like you, people who are leaders in organizational settings, to help you function more effectively. Specifically, what I want to focus on over the course of this program are what I see as 3 key roles that organizational leaders play. First, they consciously create cultures that reinforce and support behavior essential to organizational success. 2, effective leaders expand and enhance employee engagement, their willingness to participate actively in crucial organizational processes. And third, effective leaders facilitate continuous process improvement. I refer to that as the relentless search for better ways. So we're going to be looking at 3 roles that leaders play. Let's start with that first one. Effective leaders consciously create cultures that reinforce and support behavior essential to organizational success. Let's look at culture. What is culture? I think we'd all agree there's no shortage of literature on culture. There are libraries filled with books about culture. Rather than dissecting all of those, let's take a common sense approach. Culture, to me, organizational culture, is really nothing more than a composite of the people working in that organization. It's what gets done, when and how. And it's also what gets noticed, what gets honored, and what sometimes gets confronted. By whom? By organizational leaders. So the word I want you to take away from this brief discussion of culture is that it's all about behavior. The behavior of the people working in the organization is the culture, the actual culture. And the behavior of the leaders in that organization drive the culture. Here's another way of looking at culture. Culture is to organizations what attitude is to individuals. Now think about this for a minute. Attitude is an intangible, right? We can't really see physical evidence of it except in one realm, and that is what? The behavior of the people who hold that attitude. Attitude is reflected in the behavior of the person who has the attitude, and as I'm sure you know, the attitude of the person drives his or her behavior. Same can be said for culture on an organizational level. The culture is intangible. We can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, but we can see evidence of what the culture is in the behavior of the people working in that organization. And finally, and here is the key point around this whole notion of culture. The culture drives the behavior of the people in the organization. So that's kind of an idea of what culture is. There are in most organizations two different types of culture, if you will. One is the professed culture. And by professed culture, I mean the words and phrases that you will find in documents like mission statement or core values. These words and phrases basically describe the characteristics that the founders would like for their culture to exhibit. The other culture is the actual culture. And this again is the behavior of the people working in that organization. And I'm sure you would agree that in too many instances, there's a big gap between the professed culture, here's what we profess to value, here's the way we profess to behave, and the actual culture. Key role for leaders, and you'll hear this over and over again over the course of this program. A key role for leaders is to close the gaps between what sounds good and what gets done. So we've got the professed culture and the actual culture. Finally, in most organizations, there are different levels of culture. For example, there is what you might refer to as the corporate, or in maybe a less formal way, the mothership culture, the culture that emanates from the headquarters, from the C-level suites. There are, in most organizations, in addition to the corporate culture, there are going to be separate cultures for each of the entities, whether they're departments or divisions or branches. You understand what I mean, that there's not one culture. There are different cultures. Now, the ideal situation is one in which the corporate culture is matched in many of its characteristics by the factional cultures. We'll call those subcultures. Unfortunately, in many organizations, what you have is the corporate culture and countercultures, where these entities, the factions, the departments, the divisions, the branches, these cultures not only don't reflect the values espoused at the corporate level, they may be totally contrary to those values. You'll find as you go through this program that every lesson is divided up into two parts. The first part is what we'll call the content. In this lesson, for example, we've talked a little bit about culture. The second part of these lessons is what I call action items. Here are your action items for lesson number 1. I want you to pick a word or phrase that you would use to describe a characteristic of the culture that you'd like to have in your organization. That's the first part. The second action item, I want you to describe specific behavior that you would look for as evidence of that characteristic. The action items are the opportunities you have to translate the theory or the concept in each of these lessons into leadership behavior. And I strongly encourage you to do just that.